My name is Robert Wills. I'm the past Commodore of the Hudson River Ice Yacht Club and currently the president of the Hudson River Ice Yacht Preservation Trust. This was something the Dutch brought to the Hudson River Valley in the 1600s. At that point, it wasn't a sport. It was a utilitarian activity. They put ice skates on the bottom of their hulled ships so they can transport goods in the winter. Through that activity, people realized that how fast these boats can go. So starting in about the 1820s, the designs changed, so it was no longer a hulled ship with skates on the back, but the kind of craft that you see behind me that used a form similar to a crossbow with ice skates on either end of the plank, the center board, and a tiller in the back that had a big skate on it. You can see the skate back here. It's about 4 feet long, and it's sharpened to a fine edge to cut through the ice, so there's hardly any friction. So the boats start sailing, obviously with the wind. The wind propels them at first, but the sail is meant to act like a wing, same thing like an airplane wing. So instead of the forces being directed downward on an airplane wing to lift the airplane higher, with our sails, the force is directed downward to the runners. So the wind starts propelling us at a certain speed, but when we get over a certain speed, there's what's called apparent wind or virtual wind. The craft is making its own wind. So ice boats can go, the old ice boats can go about 4 times faster than the wind. These vehicles, these craft, proved to be the fastest vehicles on Earth. They regularly raced the railroad trains and beat the trains, the New York Central coming up the Hudson. There weren't airplanes, there weren't cars at the time. This piqued the imagination of everyone on the river. There were thousands of people on the ice during the late 1800s watching the races. Also, the wealthy estate owners, the Roosevelts in particular, were enamored with this sport, and they would commission new boats every year, trying to get the speed records. John Aspinwall Roosevelt, FDR's uncle, was a champion sailor. He had a boat that had 750 square feet of sail. So the boat you see behind me is 220 square feet of sail. So you get some sense of what the size was. Size mattered at the time. Designs matured, and then size wasn't so much of an issue, but at the time size mattered, so they went bigger, and bigger meant faster. Now the boats are much differently designed and go even faster. I think the record right now is 140 miles an hour for modern carbon fiber boats that look like an airplane. What differentiates our organizations from other ice boaters is that we have acquired and caretake the old boats, and it's our philosophy to not change them at all. We keep them exactly like they were at the time they were built. We have craftsmen that are blacksmiths and sail makers and woodworkers that use the same techniques as when these were built in the 1800s to keep the boats restored in sailing order and in racing order and looking like they did originally. The boat behind us here is Chris. Chris was commissioned by John Aspinwall Roosevelt, FDR's uncle, in 1898. It was built right in Poughkeepsie by George Buckout. George Buckout and his father, Jacob, were the preeminent ice boat builders in the world. And John Aspinwall Roosevelt sailed it. It was one of his favorite boats. And it's very likely that FDR sailed this boat with him as a little child, because FDR he had 60 boats of all kinds, but he had one ice boat called Hawk. He was inspired by his uncle to sail these boats. Also, his cousin Ellen Roosevelt, John's daughter, was not only the America's tennis champion, singles and doubles tennis champion in the 1800s. She was also a crack sailor and would take John Roosevelt's boat Icicle which has 750 square feet of sail, and race that for John. A little further down the line is Cyclone. Cyclone was commissioned and built, I believe, by Henry Livingston Rogers. The Rogers family, Archibald Rogers, the father, was best friends with FDR, inspired him to scientifically forest all the lands around the FDR estate here. But he was a champion ice sailor. He owned Jack Frost, which was the other world champion boat. The world championship went back and forth between John Roosevelt and Archie Rogers many times through the late 1800s and early 1900s. Henry was his son and built Cyclone. It's a small boat similar in size to this, about 190 square feet of sail. And beyond Cyclone is 999, named after the famous New York Central locomotive that was the fastest locomotive on Earth. 999 was commissioned by the J.G. Bodenstein Ice Tool Company, the family that owned that, John Bodenstein. And that boat is likely from around 1900. So the first club that was formed in the area was the Poughkeepsie Ice Yacht Club in 1861. And many of the prominent people in Poughkeepsie, the mayors and such, were members of the club. John Roosevelt was a member of that club, but there was a big controversy. So sailing was happening, but then in 1884, 85, there was a tremendous controversy over a race. And John Roosevelt and Archie Rogers and others split off to form the Hudson River Ice Yacht Club. So we've been in existence since 1885 and still kicking today. We have about 40 members today. So let me talk a little bit about the Ice Yacht Trust. We formed this not-for-profit. We've been working on it for about 2 years, and in October, New York State Board of Regents gave us our provisional charter. We have our 501c3 and are registered with New York State Charities. We're now trying to raise money to have an eventual museum. But getting to that point is going to require a lot of funds, a lot of money. And for right now, what we're doing, we're mounting shows and we're lecturing. So if anyone needs to know about ice boating, a couple of our members are very happy to speak about ice boating. And the club gives rides all the time. So watch out for our websites, Hudson River, HRIYPT.org, or White Wings and Black Ice. We always post where we're sailing and come down. But again, it's a fickle sport. Don't think that because you only have Tuesday available, you're going to sail on Tuesday.